Let's talk about Pitney Bowes. 11,000 global employees, supporting more than 750,000 plus businesses around the world, including 90% of Fortune 500. 100 years of innovation. The Pitney Bowes story is an extraordinary one, and one that the pandemic only made stronger. Let's take a look.
Let me say at the outset that all of our decisions and all of our actions are oriented toward the safety and well-being of our teams, our clients, our partners, and importantly, the communities in which we work.
I'd like to start by acknowledging that and thanking your team for adapting to what I know are not just unusual circumstances, but difficult circumstances.
And we have three streams of work. One is for the essential sites, tracking what's happening there. One is our return to office, and the other is what are the technology issues or capabilities that apply to both that can help us stay safe and continue to be productive and healthy in our business.
Our thoughts and prayers go out to all who have been impacted by COVID-19 directly or through those that you care about. And we salute those involved in caring for and giving back to others.
The communication was crisp and it was effective. The frequency that I chose to have was in small huddles, being offered in multiple languages so that people were clear and they understood exactly what it was we were doing.
People are really, as you said, Jason, adapting to new ways of working, but not only new ways of working, but new and creative ways to stay connected, not only to each other through the work environment, but to our clients, their communities, and their families and friends.
Within the bounds of what is safe, we still have to make sure that we help keep our business and our clients' businesses moving. That's part of the plus and minus of that essential infrastructure designation. We have a responsibility as PB, as members of the extended postal community, as members of the shipping and mailing environment. We have a fundamental responsibility to help keep the economy running.
Now, given everything that has occurred during this past year, support for our communities is needed now more than ever. And at Pitney Bowes, our colleagues across the company have a long-standing tradition to supporting community service.
We really wrapped our arms around one another and supported one another. One of my employees was out for an extended amount of time. We were just checking on her, sending cards, sending things like that. And she came in my office in tears, just saying thank you from all the support around one another.
We've asked people to do hard things this year, and true to Pitney Bowes, people have absolutely come through and done what we've asked and done it with both style and courage and class that's consistent with who this company has been.
Mark, good morning. Thank you for making the time to join us today and talk a little bit about Pitney Bowes in Connecticut.
Chris, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
Mark, I thought the video really captured the number of initiatives you and your team executed throughout the year. So let's start with the first question is, what was your immediate focus of you and your leadership team when the governor declared the public health emergency, 13 months ago last March?
Yeah, well, I suspect, as is true with your entire audience, our first thoughts were around keeping our employees safe. And doing the necessary things in order to ensure their well-being, and candidly, the broader Pitney Bowes family. Both, as I said, the partners we have as well as the community. From there, not knowing at that point what was in store for us, we did the necessary things that we thought needed to be done to ensure that we could weather the storm, if you will. From a financial perspective, support our customers. As was pointed out in the video, we are deemed an essential business. So that means that we needed to play an important role in the continued movement of mail and parcels, which, parcels in particular hit overwhelming heights last year. But we quickly got those things behind us. We got to the point where we were fairly confident that we were doing everything that we could do to keep our employees safe, and certainly got to the point where we weren't concerned about the long-term vitality of our business. So then our orientation really changed to coming out of this terrible period of time a stronger company. It has always been true, and it's a little ironic. Pitney Bowes started 100 years ago. We celebrated our 100-year anniversary last year. We started at the end of the first pandemic, so there was a certain symmetry to having our 100-year anniversary in the middle of the second pandemic. But what history has consistently affirmed is that these moments of dislocation are always opportunities, and it was our intent to come out of this period of time a stronger company than when we went in.
And Mark, I think that kind of sums up the story of the last year, at least for me and what we've heard at CBIA, that so many companies, instead of running from the challenge, they really met it head on. And as you kind of talked about, turning adversity into opportunity. And for Pitney Bowes, rising to that challenge, do you think that's a reflection of the company's long history of innovation and probably something ingrained in the culture of constantly reinventing itself?
Yeah, listen, this company in particular, and I'm a relative newcomer to Pitney Bowes. I've been here for the last 8 or 9 years, has a certain grit and determination to it. And early in my tenure, we were contemplating about where we should headquarter the company. And we've been headquartered in Stamford for, at that point, close to 90 plus years. And there's just a certain grit that this company has that to me has always felt very congruent with Stamford. I mean, one of the signs you see when you enter Stamford, Connecticut is, a city that works. And there's just a certain determination that, is true to Pitney Bowes, and I would say in the communities in which we operate. So it served us remarkably well. And I think served the community remarkably well as we went through what was a really difficult period.
Mark, let's talk a little bit more about that decision. I think you said it was maybe 7 years ago or shortly after you came on to stay committed to Connecticut, to keep the headquarters at Stamford. We hear a lot about, the negative stories and the bad things about Connecticut, and obviously there's been stories about some businesses leaving. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind us kind of getting inside the head of a CEO and the management team. What's the process like when that happens, and why did you and Pitney Bowes decide to stay in Connecticut? It can't all be bad.
No, that's a great question. And there are lots of different factors that go into it. The first thing that, I think is important to acknowledge is, the war for companies to domicile themselves in particular states and Canada, even certain countries, is a pretty intense war. So, we had certainly overtures from the state of New York, kind of a neighbor state, but also Ohio, Florida, and other states that were interested in domiciling our headquarters. Ultimately, there were a couple of different factors that affected our thinking, but once you can kind of sort through the economics in terms of the economics of being in one place versus the other, the conversation quickly turned then to talent and what's the right thing to do in terms of making that decision in terms of retaining and attracting the workforce you want. And for us, that came back to Connecticut. We've had a long history of being in Connecticut. We employed a couple thousand folks, and as I contemplated our going forward strategy, the talent dynamic was the one that weighed most heavily in terms of how we thought about where we were going to be. That being said, it's a continual battle, for states to move companies one way or the other, and I think that's just going to intensify.
Yeah, I agree. We hear about it all the time, and that's why it's so critical that Connecticut highlights its strength. And as you mentioned, workforce, one of the most productive workforces in the world, one of the most innovative workforces in the world. I think a lot of companies would agree with you on that. And relative to the workforce, talk a little bit about Pitney Bowes' impact on the Connecticut economy, because it's not obviously just the size of the workforce, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I would characterize it in two ways. First of all, we employ a couple thousand folks in the state, so that's a meaningful contribution to the state economy, and one that we're mindful of, and we are confident will continue. The second is, and this long preceded my tenure at the company. Pitney Bowes has had an extended track record of supporting the communities in which we operate. Walter Wheeler, who is the third CEO of Pitney Bowes, really did a tremendous amount of work to ensconce Pitney Bowes in the various communities, and that takes all kinds of forms. And certainly we financially contribute to the communities in which we operate, but on top of that, our team is very involved in volunteering and giving back. I can remember early in my tenure, I was touring the Boys and Girls Club in Stamford, Connecticut, and there was a plaque that I noticed that was from Pitney Bowes in the 1950s and Walter Wheeler, and it just reminded me of how important to our culture and how important to what we've been all about, that supporting the communities, and that extends in today. So one of the important things that we did last year as COVID hit, we made a small contribution to Stamford Hospital, which we've been supportive of for a long period of time, as they were running short of PPE, which was an important moment in time. But as we got further into the year, and candidly, there's a bunch of things that were going on, not just around COVID, but society writ large, in terms of social unrest, the riots in Portland, the riots in Chicago, et cetera. We decided to take a more overt role in our communities, and we organized a group of companies to begin to concentrate our support for various organizations that really can make a meaningful impact for individuals that come from disadvantaged backgrounds, individuals that come from more challenging set of circumstances. So we, along with Xerox and Synchrony and a few others, concentrated our support on the Fairfield County Community Foundation to really, in a meaningful way, create more opportunity for disadvantaged youth, principally disadvantaged minority youth, so they could have better educational outcomes and ultimately share in the American dream in a more meaningful way. So it's a long part of who Pitney Bowes has been for the last 100 years.
Mark, let's just touch on that even a little bit more for a second. And that was a great description, and obviously a credit to everything you and Pitney have done for the community. One of the things we've been trying to do at CBIA over the last several months is really publicize the great things our incredible businesses in Connecticut do for their communities. And it's a lot more than just job creation. You just talked about all the things you're involved in at Pitney Bowes in the Fairfield County area and Stamford specifically. And we've had some folks who we've engaged in who say, no, businesses aren't like that. They don't care about their employees. They don't care about their communities. They're all about top line, bottom line. And I've responded to them and said, you don't know the businesses in Connecticut. You don't know how engaged they are, how committed they are to their employees, how they engage they are to their communities. What would you say to that? Why are you so engaged? And what would you say to those folks who say, no, businesses don't care?
Well, I'd answer it in two ways. The first way is, from my perspective, successful businesses, those businesses that are going to enjoy a long-term future, have to answer 4 questions every day. The first is, why do investors invest in you? The second is, why do customers buy from you? The third is, why do employees work for you? And the fourth is, why do communities allow you the license to operate in their various communities? And if you're going to have a successful business, as Pitney Bowes has had for the last 100 years, you need to have very clear answers to all of those questions. And we're very mindful of it. And we think that's the right way to create long-term value for our shareholders. There's only so long, and you see examples of this today. Businesses can operate if they're not supporting their communities appropriately, if they're not, more broadly supporting society appropriately. Same thought with your customers and employees. You have to, continue to earn and re-earn their business. And I would say, as it relates to communities, if you kind of look at what's going on in society, many institutions, government, media, et cetera, have lost credibility with different aspects of our society. Businesses, so far have been able to maintain a degree of confidence from society, but that's fragile. And as you look at some of the societal unrest and some of the things that are going on, that dynamic of earning your license, if you will, to operate continues to become more and more important. So the first answer to your question is why does Pitney Bowes do it? Well, we think that's the right way to create long-term value for our shareholders and the rest of the stakeholders. The second reason, Chris, is it's just the right thing to do. It is, Pitney Bowes has been guided for 100 years about doing the right thing the right way, and it's easy when things are going well. You get into a year like 2020, it's a little bit more challenging. So I'm proud of how Pitney Bowes operated last year, but I'm also very proud of the companies in Connecticut broadly. I mean, when I decided that I wanted to do something more overt to organize support for inner city youth and educational outcomes, every CEO took my call that I call it. It was I won't say easy, but people congealed very, very quickly, and I think that's just indicative of who the Connecticut business leaders are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we just heard from an amazing panel of nonprofit who were just very inspiring and really talked about the for-profit, nonprofit partnership and collaboration and how incredible it is and what such a good job people do putting time and money to use through those nonprofits. So, kudos to you at Pitney Bowes, but to all the Connecticut businesses who are so invested in their communities and the state as a whole and really want to see the state grow, really want to see the citizens succeed in Connecticut. And to that point, Mark, let's shift a little bit about the economy, but the economy is about residents and citizens succeeding when it's all said and done, because that's how the economy hums. What do you believe the challenges are for Connecticut's economy or our economic recovery in the coming months and years ahead based on the seat you sit at Pitney Bowes?
Listen, Connecticut's got a set of challenges as it relates to its fiscal situation going forward. So I give the current governor, credit for trying to step into it. But as you look at, the state broadly, there's a real issue that the state's going to have to step up to in terms of their long-term liabilities for state employees. And there's different ways to address that, but it's critical. And Governor Lamont has started to work to put that dynamic more in balance. But it's critical that that's done. And one of the things that I would implore, I had the opportunity to speak to this group is, we all probably operate at the state level in terms of trying to affect appropriate government policy. But I would also say your state legislatures are a really important part of that equation. So whatever you think the right answers are, this is somewhat independent of a particular policy prescription. I think getting involved in trying to ensure that the state has the right set of economic policies going forward is important. And you can see clearly across the 50 states right now that state government, local government makes a big difference. You look at places like California and the number of businesses that are leaving California because of their fiscal policy and some of the other things that are going on. It makes a difference. So I think Connecticut's been a great place for Pitney Bowes for the last 100 years, and it's a great place to do business now. That's something that you can never take for granted. So I would encourage all of us, regardless of your political affiliations or your certain policy proclivities, to get constructively involved in what's going on.
And Mark, how important is that message to you? You mentioned that you're paying attention to it, and I think some folks think, our big company CEOs, they're focused more on the national economics. They don't really care what happens in Connecticut or what happens at Hartford at a local or state level. And you just mentioned, and we talked at the opening, lots of opportunities that we're seeing in Connecticut, lots of positive economic indicators, but certainly some challenges. And last week there was some talk about tax increases on corporates and individuals and also additional spending. How attuned are you at Pitney Bowes, and I know just speak for yourself as CEO, to what's happening in Connecticut, to those stories, whether they're good or bad, and maybe what that weighs in your mind as far as your investments here in Connecticut?
It's really important. And, we need to pay attention to both candidly, the global, the national, as well as the local level, because we do business, across the entire globe, but we're also in lots of different states. So we spend a lot of time making sure we understand what's going on, and the cost of business is one of the factors. Connecticut's been advantaged because it's had I think by and large a strong educational system. It's got highly skilled workers, and that has served the state remarkably well. But that was also true in California, and businesses are more and more moving because there's states that are hungry. We continue to get overtures from the state of Florida and the state of Ohio about moving our corporate headquarters. So cost isn't the only factor. As I said, it's principally around our talent strategy. But be clear, you can tax your way right out of competitiveness as it relates to businesses. I would say it's a company like Pitney Bowes to a degree has choices, but I'm very empathetic to the local dry cleaner, the local restaurant. They can't just move their business out of the state. They're here. So our focus is on making this state as successful as they can be. I think it's interesting to watch what's going on in New York right now, and the dynamics of their tax policy. I think that'll create an opportunity for Connecticut, but it also is an important lesson. Many businesses have choices about where they domicile particular functions, both across the United States, but also around the world.
Yeah, that California story, obviously, it's been getting a lot of attention recently. The exodus from California, despite having the education system that you mentioned, the warm weather that everyone complains that maybe we don't have in the Northeast 12 months a year, mountains, beautiful scenery, ocean, yet people and businesses are leaving that state. And as you mentioned, it's about the policies. The policies sometimes become more important to the culture.
Well, I think, listen, I mean, what last year taught businesses, or at least opened their eyes to, is there were orthodoxies about the importance of proximity and geographic location in terms of how business gets done. Mm-hmm. For example, I ran a telesales organization when I was at IBM, and there was a belief I had, an orthodoxy that I have subscribed to for a long period of time, that telesales organizations needed to be domiciled all together in order to provide the right level of supervision, the right level of productivity. What we found last year is when we closed our offices and dispersed the telesales function, that their productivity actually went up. So it's a important reminder that with the development of technology, and candidly last year necessity was the mother of invention, there's a whole new set of possibilities that are open to companies in terms of how and where work gets done. That coupled with what's going on from a fiscal perspective, both in the states but as well as the federal government, should be eye-opening to elected officials.
And relative to that new dynamic, Mark, what are you all thinking at Pitney Bowes, and or just what are you hearing from some of the other companies in Connecticut and across the country about what the workforce will look like, post-pandemic, the hoteling, telecommuting, everyone in the office? Just give us some thoughts around that. It's a big question we've been asked.
Yeah, listen, I start with a high degree of humility about this particular subject. I can remember after 9/11, everyone said that companies and businesses were going to move out of New York City forever, and 4 years later, everyone was back in New York City. So, with that being said, I do think something may be different this time in the sense of that intersection between how companies think about productivity and candidly how talented employees want to work and where they want to work. So I would say by and large companies are anxious to get back to the office in some way, shape, or form. It may not be in precisely the form that they were in pre-COVID, and I suspect that'll happen over the next several months as you listen to the scientists. I think in this country we're about to break the back of this virus if we can continue with the good work around vaccination, certainly therapeutics. But the other dynamic beyond what companies want to do is where do employees want to work. We've had several of our employees relocate as we closed our offices, and candidly we were amenable to that, and to a degree this has been easier for Pitney Bowes than others because we've had a long history of being flexible in terms of where people work and working remotely, and we've had the technologies to support it. But I think it's going to be interesting to see, particularly with the younger generation, how do they think about going back to work? I know with my 3 kids who are all in New York City right now, I'm not 100% certain that a company is going to be able to tell them where and how they want to work. So I think we're in for an interesting time in terms of how that works itself out. I guess my advice would be to stay flexible. So we're all going to start out with an approach of how we bring folks back to work in a safe manner. But I think we should all be open to learning how work can get done in different ways. And there continues to be orthodoxies around. It's very hard to affect cultural change and very hard to innovate with people physically remote. I think the other side of that, however, is those companies that can figure out how to do that, can figure out how to be innovative, can figure out how to affect cultural change with a physically distributed workforce are giving an advantage in terms of the war for talent. So I think this is a good time to kind of put to the side all of the things that we thought were true and open our imagination to different ways that we can work. Because I think the companies that get that right are going to be companies that are successful in the war for talent. And by the way, the states that get that right in terms of creating that opportunity, the necessary conditions, not just economically, but around infrastructure and broadband, and some of the things that are in the popular conversation right now are going to be those companies in those states that are most successful going forward.
Mark, I think you just put the exclamation point on what we heard from Andrew Howitt from the New York Fed Reserve at the opening of our segment when we were talking about why are there high levels of unemployment, yet there's high levels of job openings at the same time. And he says it's not just about having a job opening and getting people to it now. It's a personal choice. And you just talked a lot about those personal choices that people will make, whether it's going to New York or working in a high rise or working in Connecticut. And it's obviously going to be critical for retention and recruitment.
Well, it's why we're so focused on education, because you look at the basic dynamics right now in this country. There's 7.5 million open jobs, and there's probably roughly the same number of unemployed individuals. So there's lots of different layers to that. One is people typically are not willing to relocate to where the work is, but the other aspect is around the skills. So that's why we're so focused on reaching into the education system, particularly the K through 12 system, and ensuring that people that get a high school education are able to be competitive in this 21st century economy. So there's lots of different layers to it. There's skills, there's technology in terms of broadband access, there's the necessary other infrastructure items, and it all has to kind of fit into a geographic package. But it's I'll go back to what I said at the outset. These moments of dislocation, and clearly the last 12 months have been that, are always opportunities. And those companies in those states that are most facile will be the ones that take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, and I noticed you emphasize not only business, but also government in the states. And we've been talking about that, especially with the amazing amount of federal dollars coming to the states across the country. Just like the vaccine rollout, there were, I'll say, winners and losers among states. Obviously, those who were most effective with the vaccination were able to get their economy open quicker, and Connecticut, fortunately, was a leader there. There, unfortunately, will be probably winners and losers in how government spends these dollars at the state level, at the town level, at the board level, and it's critical that they get it right. Would you agree with that? It seems like you're emphasizing that.
Absolutely, and there's plenty of examples. So, if you look at the United States, notwithstanding, the country got off to a little bit slow start in terms of getting, vaccinations in people's arms. It came up the curve very quickly. I spoke to Governor Lamont, a couple of months ago and congratulated him on being 6th or 7th from a state perspective in terms of per capita vaccinations. He said, "No, Mark, we're 4th." So it tells you he was mindful of it. On the other side of it, you look at, Europe, which is, for a variety of different reasons, been very slow to get people vaccinated. It's, continues to have problems. And, you look at some of the tragedies that are going on right now in India and Brazil, and it's, again, it just reminds you that if you don't get this right, there's just a huge toll, for sure economic toll, but, as well as more importantly, a human toll in getting this right. So, I think the federal government and the states have done a good job of getting people vaccinated. I think, as businesses, I would implore, my fellow business leaders in Connecticut that we've got to find a way to encourage our employees to continue to get vaccinated because it has gone from a demand problem or a supply problem to a demand problem. So we need to ensure that we can get as much of our teams vaccinated as possible.
Huge opportunity for the state. Marc, talk about some opportunities for Pitney Bowes that you see over the next 1 to 5 years. I think you guys earnings coming out soon. Where are the opportunities that you see for the company?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We actually announced earnings this morning, so it's been a busy morning for us. So if you look at Pitney Bowes, when I joined in 2012, probably 85% of our revenue and a higher percent of our profits were from the mail business. The mailing business continues to be an important part of who we are, but we've pivoted into shipping. So in particular, e-commerce shipping. So now over 50% of our revenue comes from e-commerce logistics and shipping. And as we talked about, in these moments of dislocation create opportunities. Last year, I've never seen a demand environment like we saw last year. If you look at the percent of retail purchases that were done over the internet, pre-COVID, it was 17%. It went up to 27% last year, and there was just remarkable demand. And you see it working from home. How many times a day do you see a UPS or FedEx or USPS, hopefully, person delivering parcels? So it's been a remarkable opportunity for us and has accelerated our transformation. So as we think about our company going forward, we will continue to have important mail business, but more and more of our future revenues are going to be around e-commerce shipping. And then we've got a financial services business underneath that that supports both of those businesses. And, the financial services business, importantly, is really focused on small businesses and creating financial capability for those businesses. So we've done the hard work to reposition this company. We talk about transformations in 4 chapters. The first is getting some quick wins. The second is investment. The third is revenue growth. We've actually grown revenue for the last 4 years. This will be the 5th year. And the final chapter is profitable revenue growth. And, that's kind of where we are right now. We increased profits and revenue in the first quarter, and we're, forecasting that we do that for the year. When we do that, we'll have done what very few companies have been able to do, and that is to move a company from secular decline that was disrupted by technology to a bright new future. So exciting for Pitney Bowes, exciting for Connecticut, but it's got to continue to execute.
Very exciting, Marc. So talk then about the other side. What are the potential obstacles, the challenges that would hold Pitney Bowes back from realizing those tremendous opportunities that you just described?
For better or worse, I think for better, most of the challenges we have right now are our own, are dependent on our execution. So, for the most part, we believe we control our destiny as it relates to our future, which is a good position to be in because I like our capabilities. We obviously, continue to have an important relationship with the United States Postal Service, and the Postal Service is going through their own drama right now. But I'm confident that they're going to get on the other side of it, and we'll do the necessary things from a legislative perspective in this country to provide the Postal Service the foundation that they need to be successful in. And we also, we pay attention to what the governments are doing. So, we're paying great attention right now to the conversation in this country around taxes and infrastructure. When we went through the last tax program under the Trump administration, we took half of the benefit and put it in the hourly wages of our employees and the other half into our small business lending. So, we like to think that, we've been a good example of putting constructive tax policy to work for our business and for society and for our workers and for our customers. So, all those things need to continue to line up.
Yeah, so that was what the feds did years ago with the tax cut. Obviously, that was critical to the individuals getting more personal income wealth. So credit to you guys. And I know a lot of companies around the country really did that and get concerned when you start to see ups and downs in the corporate tax structure every 4 years. Businesses want predictability, stability, certainty. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And they need it from the federal level, they need it from the state level. I mean, you need to be able to plan. I mean, so there's a threshold of competitiveness that, each of the, federal and states need to be at, but then you need to be able to plan for it. I mean, we're not, if there's a change in tax policy at the federal level, we're not going to go back to the employees and say, listen, sorry, we're taking the money back. But, at the same time, it would cause you to think carefully about what you did or didn't do as it relates to future tax policies. So, companies were criticized for taking the tax benefits and doing short-term things with it. Well, if tax policy is going to be every 2 years, then that's what you're going to get.
Mark, obviously the last year has been horrific and tragic from a health perspective, but we talked a lot about the adversity and how companies turn that into opportunity. In your opinion, is Pitney Bowes stronger today because of what's happened over the past 12 months?
No doubt. We had record revenues last year. We've turned the corner on our transformation. And most importantly, and most gratifying from my perspective, our engagement survey results, what our team is telling us about their various level of engagement hit record highs last year. So, part of that is because of the success of the business. But part of it is, our team saw that, when things were difficult, we stepped up and we put their interests first. So, all of those things are, critically important going forward. And, again, like so many of your audience, I mean, we are just so thankful for, our team. And, we have close to 15,000 workers. Certainly the office workers were working from home last year. But 2/3 of our workforce was in sortation centers, in logistics centers, in distribution centers every day, doing hard and essential work in very challenging circumstances. So we're remarkably thankful, and we like to think that we're providing a really terrific environment for people to work.
That's great to hear, Mark. I think there's quite a few companies who just feel that they became stronger over the past 12 plus months. Mark, last question. The Capitol's open. You've got the podium. You're in front of the governor or the entire legislature. What would be your word to them for as we get ready to close out this legislative session over the next 6 weeks and going forward? What would be your recommendation to them?
We need to step up and do the things in this state that ensure the long-term vitality. That certainly includes having the right fiscal policies, but also the right infrastructure. Connecticut has been advantaged and has terrific business community, but just because we've had it for the last 100 years doesn't mean we're going to have it for the next 100 years. And time is running short, so there's some hard decisions that need to be made. But they need to get made. So now is the time. These decisions aren't going to get any easier.
Couldn't have said it better, Mark. Great. Thank you, and thanks for sharing the Pitney Bowes story this morning and for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been tremendous.
Thanks for having me, Chris, and thanks to all of the folks in the audience. You're great colleagues to do business with. We're fortunate to be in a great state, but we need to work to continue to make it a great state.
We'll see you soon.
Take care, Chris.
We're proud to have Pitney Bowes as part of Connecticut's business community. And thank you in the audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you all in person sometime, hopefully in the not too distant future. Here's more on the Pitney Bowes story to take us out.
The global pandemic has put our world in a different light, where we realize how interconnected our lives really are. And we come to appreciate those who provide the essential services that allow us to continue. At Pitney Bowes, we recognize this responsibility, including the vital need to keep commerce flowing. Our sending solutions enable people to work remotely and safely, to keep their businesses open and productive, and to ship essential goods with exceptional accuracy. Our e-commerce logistics centers are running around the clock, coordinating hundreds of millions of packages a year to ensure delivery to towns and cities around the globe. Our intelligent lockers help minimize the risk of contact, offering a convenient way to pick up purchases, packages, and mail. Our financial services provide critical capital and financing, so businesses of all sizes can continue to operate. And our pre-sort services work hand in hand with the U.S. Postal Service, improving accuracy and speeding delivery. So important invoices, statements, and parcels get to the right people at the right time. Each day and every day, 750,000 businesses worldwide, including 90% of the Fortune 500, count on us for the services they need. And during these times, we have proudly answered that call. 11,000 strong and guided by our principle, do the right thing the right way.